everybody, how you doing? It's Max, Chief Evangelist over here at Hapily. I wanted to give you a quick example of our calculated pricing feature. The calculated pricing feature allows you to build custom calculated formulas that will automatically calculate the price of different line items that you have when you're building a quote in HubSpot. So let me give you an example here. I have this calculation that is calculating a custom price for a produce shipping line item that I actually have, right? So I'm calling this my produce shipping formula, and I gave it a description of shipping cost adjusted for frozen items, right? Now, what this lets you do is this will let you build custom formulas that will automatically generate a price for you in real time for a specific line item, right? So in my case, what I've done is I've written out my actual equation here. I have different prices per mile for fresh goods, different prices per mile for frozen goods. And then what I'm doing is I'm inserting these tokens to basically dynamically give me the values I need to calculate the actual price here. So I can do a couple of different things. I can pull in properties from the company record associated to the deal. I can pull in properties from the deal itself. So if on your deal record you have different numbers that your sales reps punch in during the sales process, you can use those numbers to automatically calculate stuff using calculated pricing. On top of that, I can bring in values from line items themselves. So if it's a predetermined value from a product that I have in HubSpot, or it's a blank field that I can just kind of type in on my own as I'm building the quote, I can do that as well. I could also use something called rollups. Rollups are things that you can build inside of Quote Hapily that will dynamically generate a value based on other line items on the actual quote itself or other attributes about the quote, right? So for example, in this case, I'm using rollups to calculate the total amount of fresh goods weight and frozen goods weight. And then I'm using I'm using company properties here to determine miles from the warehouse. And I'm adding in my own sort of static values, and I'm doing this big calculation here to basically give me an estimate on what the shipping costs would be, depending on how much fresh or frozen produce that I order. Now, once I've actually built this formula, and you can build these formulas for anything you want, right? As long as you just build them out, you bring in your values and your tokens, you're good to go. You need to assign it to a specific product. So I have a line item called shipping cost. Shipping cost is always going to be variable depending on the products that I put on the quote. So once I've assigned this to specific products, and I can do multiple ones here if I wanted to, I'd hit save, and then I would go build a quote. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here, right? I've started to build out a quote using the rapid quote builder, and down with my line items, I can see that I have a pallet of fresh lettuce and a pallet of frozen peas. The fresh lettuce and the frozen peas have a property in the background that tells me the weight of those actual pallets of produce, right? And so what's happening here is, depending on the quantity that I give, right, it is actually giving me total weight for each one of those different line items based on the quantity. So right now it's 100. I have one quantity for each. If I were to change it, it would change automatically. But I just have 100 pounds of fresh goods and 100 pounds of frozen goods. And I built rules in those roll-ups to basically say, hey, if it says fresh, count it as fresh. If it says frozen, count it as frozen. I could build it on other properties if I wanted to, right? But from here, just by adding the shipping cost as a line item, it's automatically calculating the unit price and the net price of this actual shipping cost, right? Without me having to do anything. All I had to do was add the shipping cost to the quote. It's very transparent and explains how the price is actually arrived at based on the calculation. And then I can go ahead and create the quote just like that. If these were any properties that were pulling off of line items and there was no value in there, it would let me type the value in as I'm building the quote here instead of like locking it in this case. And I'd be able to generate and change the price in real time as I'm building the quote, which is a really, really wild thing to do when you think about, you know, the lack of your ability to do that using HubSpot's native quote building experience, right? But that is how you do calculated pricing. That's just one example. There's an infinite amount of things you could do with calculated pricing, but that's a good example of how it works in Quote Hapily. If you guys have any questions on how to set up calculated pricing for any sort of circumstance you could imagine, go ahead and let us know.